Welcome to Resiliency Redefined. I'm your host, Robyne, and I am thrilled to share with you information about resiliency, well-being, performance, education, business, parenting, and everything in between. I'm committed to joining you each week to talk about these big ideas and bring them into action, habits, tools, strategies, tactics that allow us to finally uncover what it takes to truly be well. And I'm just so excited that you're here. I am so excited to spend some time with you to have a wee little chat about the fifth and the final variable that we talk about in the everyday resiliency theory. So, if you're just joining me here, what I've done over the last wee while is explained each of the 5 pillars of everyday resiliency, what it takes to be well, especially in this unwell world. And today we're going to take a deep dive into humor, the fifth one. Now, let me tell you, this is the wild card. Okay. So when I get to work with people, again, all over the world, hearing some of the most unbelievable stories about perseverance, about abilities to bounce back, abilities to build a comeback, being able to weather some of the most difficult experiences in their lives. What I just kept on coming upon is that resilient people were funny. Like they were actually like really funny. Now it was, I would say, a bit of a dark humor. Like, I mean, like HR violation type humor. Like I couldn't imagine, like I couldn't, again, being in these environments where folks were telling me like these like awful, horrible, no good, rotten things that have happened to them. And then they would like make like this off color comment, or they would be able to just like in that intensity of the share, they would be able to like just throw in something that just like you broke out in laughter or you just had this moment of reprieve. Now, at the time, I started to think about like, okay, how do I incorporate this into like the seriousness of the conversation about resiliency? Because it felt like it didn't fit, but there was just so much evidence that this fits somewhere, but I wasn't sure where. So initially, everyday resiliency was actually the 4 pillars. It was belonging, perspective, acceptance, and hope. Like that's what I presented. That's how I kind of built the ship. But then what just kept coming over and over again is like I was missing out because this other dimension was so critical. And I saw this with members of the military. I even saw this with like ER folks. Like I saw this in like newsrooms when they were reporting these horrific events. Like they still had this ability to like hold this, like whatever that was. I ended up deciding that I was going to take the leap. I called it humor because to me it was like the like big definition of humor, which included like merriment, lightheartedness, this idea of like ease, like laughter, like all of those things. To me, I was able to sum up in humor. Okay, so this is what we've stumbled upon. When, for example, somebody laughs, their nervous system, what happens is their body will release this natural tranquilizer. Okay, so this natural tranquilizer goes into their bloodstream, and what it does is it blocks their pain receptors. So, what happens at that moment is that your pain receptors are blocked, so you don't feel pain. So, again, that doesn't solve all your problems when you're navigating this as a strategy for resiliency. What it does do is it gives you a moment of reprieve. It allows people to operate from this precious place where they're able to respond versus react. So, humor is a component of how people are able to show up, even in the hardest, most difficult, the darkest days. And what's so beautiful about this is it allows people who are with us to be able to like be part of it. Now, a few little kind of caveats on this one. I would encourage us when we think about the humor as a part of resiliency that it isn't like self-deprecating, right? I don't think there's, oh gosh, I get cringy when I hear people like self-deprecate to the point where they're like making fun of themselves. This is more like, I would say, like kind of like a global practice versus, so again, like, so as you're going through something difficult, you say something a wee bit off color, or perhaps maybe you swear. Okay, on that note, I can share with you that was this remarkable finding that we saw in the literature that, are you ready for this? People who swear, like know how to curse or cuss without like swearing at somebody, they live longer. Yeah, it actually increases longevity and vitality. And what we learned on that front is this idea that it had to do with temperament. On one end, we noticed people tended to be free flowers. Like even in really difficult situations, they were able to like say something off color. They could roll with something. What also was evident is they were letting things go. They were letting go of those little irritants, those little offenses in the moment, versus on the other side of it, we saw people would bottle things up or they would brew and they would remember every offense, every little stressor, every irritant, and they would replay it over and over in their mind. I think, particularly when folks are in that place of like bottling and brewing, they love to revisit it between like 1 a.m. and 3 a.m. That seems to be like the sweet spot. And eventually it interrupts sleep, it impacts your immune system. So that's why we see that there's a temperament component to people who know how to swear without getting in trouble that actually helps them live longer. It's encouraging. That's pretty hope filled for many of us. But back to the point about humor. What we see is it's the body's way of being able to like hold big emotion. It's the body's way of being able to give you these little lifelines, these little moments of reprieve, making the people around us feel like that we're approachable to them to be part of the conversation, that they can show up for us. And it just really kind of almost offers this little bit of like just this soft place to land, this little bit of encouragement when we're going through something deep. Now, historically, they used to refer to this phenomena as gallows humor. So as people were like being marched to their execution, they would call it lunacy, and people would laugh and dance and joke around, and folks would be watching this being like, see, these people, these people aren't right. But what happens was the body was protecting itself. It was filling them up with all of those kind of feel good pharmacy items. So that way they could like cope with what was happening, which was awful and horrific, no doubt. But it just gave them this reprieve. And so they called it gallows humor. Now, I've worked with folks in media, I worked with folks and in journalism, and they talk about it as newsroom humor. So, like, imagine being in this position where you're reporting on this awful thing that's happened. And then all of a sudden, the next segment is talking about a hot dog eating contest. And you literally have to go from one to the other, right? Here you are telling people about these travesties that are happening in the world. And then atrocities, maybe atrocities is what they're called, atrocities in the world, and then all of a sudden you're talking about a hot dog eating contest. Like you gotta shift gears somehow. So that's what they would do in the newsroom. They would like make light of the fact that this is the reality. Or in emergency rooms, they would call it ER humor, right? Where again, you're with so much trauma and so many persons that are going through like the worst day of their life. And you have to find a way to just like put it in a container. And it again, it's never at somebody else's expense. It was just this ability to just kind of like you just kind of rise to this moment of reprieve. So that's what I've been able to see in my work on humor. Now, this is a question I often get asked, like, how do you coach somebody on that? Right? Like when somebody's going through a terrible, no good, rotten time, how do you get them to think about like merriment or lightheartedness? And that's a really great question. I'm still trying to figure it out. One thing that I know, how it really helps if like we don't take ourselves too seriously. Now, I know this work is important. I appreciate that people are doing very difficult things. They're raising the future. They're navigating very time sensitive things at work or whatever it might be. I'm not suggesting that your lives aren't serious, but there's like a degree of like just letting things be a little bit messy sometimes, not expecting ourselves to always get it right or like always be perfect. And again, I often think that there are these moments where we actually get a choice. Where, and I think it was the Girls who said, like in their lyrics, it's either like we laugh or we can cry our eyes about it. Like we can literally like beat ourselves up about it, or we can just like laugh at just the reality that, yeah, this is what today is. Now, I remember one time I had one of those moments where I embraced the choice of leaning into humor, where I recall taking the children to school one morning and we were running a wee bit late, not new. We get them to school. I get them to school. And at the end of the day, one of the children's teachers said to me, "Hey, Robin, I got it." I pulled me aside at pickup and she's like, "I got to share this with you." And I was like, "Okay." And she's like, "Well, as you know, Ava was late to school this morning." And I was like, "Yes." And of course, I'm carrying shame and guilt and getting ready to defend why we were late. But nevertheless, she said, "No, no, it's fine." She said, "But I got to tell you." So when she walked into the classroom, she put away her bag in the coat room and then she came to circle because they were all sitting in the circle. And she said, the teacher said, I just like kind of no big deal, be like, "Hey, Ava, why are you late this morning?" And Ava looked at the teacher and like, understand this. Ava was probably like 5 years old. She said, "I don't know why we're late, but it has something to do with my mom needing to get her shit together." That is what she told the educator. And what was wild, I recall that morning driving, talking to myself. Of course, those little car seats, those little souls are always listening, saying, like, I need to get my stuff together. Like, I said that out loud. And so Ava proceeded to tell her educator she wasn't sure why she's late, but it has to do with her mom needing to get her stuff together. But she used the S word. So clearly that's going to help with Ava and her longevity. Circling back for just a moment to that notion of swearing, I got to tell you this cute other little story. I was in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada, and we were talking about how swearing helps. And this was at this like health and safety event. And I recall one gentleman said, he's like, "Hey, lady." And I always love when they call me lady. I think it's adorable. And he's like, "Hey, lady." He's like, that swearing thing you said was like so on point. He goes, "I don't know about the research that it makes you live longer, but what I do know is that if you are ever at a job site, like a construction site, and somebody like makes a mistake and yells sugar or oops a daisies or oh dear, don't buy that house. You want somebody who's dropping F bombs like it's an adjective because he said, then they're locked in. They care and they are locked in." So I thought that was hilarious, that notion that we only want to invest in houses where we have somebody who is definitely using the real swear words while they were building it, which I thought was quite interesting. So, my dear, dear friends, what I have seen in 20 years of trying to wrap my head around resiliency in a professional scape is that those five variables create the most beautiful constellation of ways that we are able to show up each and every day, even in the hardest parts. So, just to recap, a sense of belonging, that idea that we are with our people. And again, that one caring, consistent champion in your corner who you're fighting for, who you're aligned with can make the world of difference. And I just love hearing stories when people reflect back on the people who made the biggest impact on their lives, whether it be coaches or educators or the mama or the tia, the auntie, just the people who, if it wasn't for that person, their future would look very, very different. So having somebody and some people to fight for, to fight with, it makes a big difference. So your sense of belonging matters. Your perspective, which again, yes, it's an attitude, it's a mindset, but it's deeper than that. It's your intuition. It's those working in alignment with your head and your heart on the same page, being able to know how to make what matters most matter most. And just recently, I was working with a group of senior executives, and I said, when we're talking about perspective, I said, when you're in a situation where you're trying to pick between work and your family, always pick your family. Like that always will be the best return on your investment. You will never regret showing up for your family or the people that matter most. Now, the third variable was that of acceptance. And I get it. It is so hard to navigate the things that we don't want to navigate, that we did not sign up for yet. This is what's in front of us. And it's just the reality of recognizing these are the pieces. This is what I have to work with. And trusting that we're well resourced enough to work with our situations. It's that idea of, somehow being able to trust the process, that this is what I have to figure out to get to where I need to be. The fourth one, the variable of hope. Gosh, this is what the world needs such the big dose of right now, being able to hold hope, living hope filled. So often people ask me, like, how do you practice hope? How do you cultivate it? Now, I feel so fortunate that I just this notion of hope, like I am so drawn to this. And I shared that in the last episode about this idea of that little pilot light that I believe it's all going to work out. I wholeheartedly believe the future is bright. And then the fifth and the final variable is that variable of humor, lightheartedness, joy, merriment, play, swearing, all of those things to create this like ability to be able to have little micro moments of reprieve, moments where our biology is working with us to give us just that little bit of okayness. So that way we can show up and make the next right choice. Now, we don't have to figure out everything in the moment. It's this idea of just having those little breaks, those little micro moments of reprieve to be able to find our next right step. And the beautiful thing about the human condition is that when we are in forward momentum, it feels better than when we are stuck. When we are stuck and not even knowing what's our next right move, that cognitive dissonance doesn't feel great. We're not meant to be in that place of being like frozen, being able to like work towards something, even if it's not the best choice down the road, but even if it's just moving you in the direction that you wish to go, it makes a really big difference. Now, I wholeheartedly appreciate the fact that sometimes things are just awful and some things are hard. And it's hard to even imagine how to cultivate daily practices that are going to allow us to nurture those home teams, that are going to give us that opportunity for perspective and acceptance, have those hope practices and a wee little bit of fun in the moment. But we do know that will make a difference. And I'm excited to be able to share with you each week tools, practices, ideas that are research informed, that we know this stuff actually works to help people be able to get through the hard times, to get through the things that y'all didn't sign up for yet. Here we are, and we have to face it. So, to be able to do this work, what I think is so helpful is to recognize how far we've come. Recognize that your survival rate for difficult things is 100%. You have survived the stuff, the big, the hard, the ugly, the messy, that at maybe one time you thought, I could never imagine this. Yet, look how far you have come. Look what you've made of all of your life choices. And what's so amazing, I recently heard a quote that said, if I could erase all of my mistakes, I wouldn't, because I wouldn't be me. We are so much, we are so much like built together of all of these different parts of who we are. The good stuff, maybe stuff we don't love so much, not messy in middle as well. But the idea is this is all part of our story. It's all part of who we are, how we show up. And Dr. Wayne Dwyer once said something that I thought was so beautiful when he was talking about like this idea of being like our best self. He said, you can never fail at being yourself. So wherever you are, that's exactly where you're meant to be. Sure, we can do better. Sure, we can learn. Maybe some of us have to do a lot of unlearning, but the idea is that like we're exactly who we are, where we are in this moment in time. The fact that we're here in itself is a miracle. If you actually just think about it for a second, it's just remarkable that we get to do what we do. And I'm also very sure that there are things that are happening right now in your life, even if you're in the middle of a storm, that at one point you prayed for, you worked for, you wished for, you imagined. Can you imagine one day being able to be here, to be able to do this, or whatever that might look like? There was a time when like this would have felt almost like unbelievable. And sometimes one of the practices I love to do just to like really illustrate that for like the different parts of myself is like to just do this little exercise where you like imagine like your little self. And I think we all have this kind of idea of what our little self looks like. I know I have a picture, and I'm pretty sure in the picture I might be like 2 or 3, but it's just like one picture. And gosh, when I was a kid, like we didn't have like 26,000 pictures of ourselves on phones. Like maybe you have a couple that survived childhood, but I have this one picture that's like little Robyne. And I love that little girl so much that I actually dedicated my book, Stress Wisely, to her. to that little girl. And I think about her often in this picture. It lets me kind of imagine kind of having that connection with that part of myself, which is still in there somewhere, right? And just like show them and tell that part of you about your future. Tell them what it's going to be like. And yes, there's going to be lots of bumps and bruises and lessons and so many regrets and so many mistakes. And we still get to do this. We are still here, which means better days are ahead. That's absolutely like cornerstone of truth that I've seen in my work on resiliency is that better days are ahead, that there are big, bright futures that are just waiting for us to get there. Thank you so very much for spending time with me. I hope there's a gem or two in here that speaks to you. Please feel free to comment, share if you found it helpful, pass it along, invite somebody along with you so we can have bigger chats and grow this community of folks who are doing the absolute best we can with the tools, the energy, and the resources that are available to us today and each and every day. So thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. I'm excited to invite you to our next conversation where we're going to unpack the barriers to resiliency. What's the stuff that gets in the way? And you know what? You might be surprised when you see the top 3. So until next time, take good care, and I'll see you just around the corner. Bye for now. Thank you for spending time with this podcast episode today. I hope you found something helpful in Resiliency Redefined. Please feel free to share it with somebody who you might think could benefit. Maybe there was something useful, something in particular that you think you could pay forward. Also, if you have a moment, please feel free to rate and review this podcast wherever you like to listen to your podcast. It means the world to me. And again, thanks for your time. Thank you for your interest. Take good care, and I'll see you next time.